Okay. And with the understanding that some people might trickle in, I think we're going to just get started from here. Oh, I shouldn't have introduced myself to the call before recording, so I will repeat that I'm Chelsea Palmer. I am president of UBC's Blockchain Club. Kunal Kumar is treasurer, and we are your little team bringing this first virtual event with Joseph Pallant from Blockchain for Climate Foundation. Welcome, Joseph.
Thanks, Chelsea. Thanks, Kunal. Real treat to be here.
Yeah, it's super. We were super excited to invite you along as our first speaker for an event like this, because as I was kind of giving a spoiler earlier on, like this is just your foundation is one of the first in the space that said, hey, how do we take this new blockchain technology stuff and actually build a plan to improve a real world problem? So before we dive into the actual foundation, I was wondering if you would be willing to give us a little bit of your background before that and just kind of what brought you to Blockchain for Climate Foundation in your history.
Sure. Thanks. Absolutely. Um, so what brought me to blockchain or to seeing that the Blockchain for Climate Foundation was something that we should create and build and grow really can be pinned directly to the work that I've been doing for 16 years now in the carbon offset and climate finance space. So have been working building tools to enable the development and implementation of projects that get or keep carbon out of the atmosphere. And my particular piece of that puzzle has been working to understand, quantify, and then prove the greenhouse gas impact of these projects based on standards that people can agree on and then use as markers of quality as well. So fundamentally have been building projects whose output is an intangible environmental asset quantified into 1 ton carbon dioxide equivalent emission reduction outcomes. And so in working in that space and encountering blockchain, pretty quickly realized that the whole idea around blockchain and tokenization of a value, if it's if it's a cryptocurrency, it's money primarily, or value, dollar value, or we could denominate in bitcoins, in Satoshi value. And in this case with carbon, we're doing it as tons of carbon dioxide. So why don't we tokenize this environmental asset and turn it into a digital blockchainized environmental asset that can then be used in kind of the constructs that we were already building up around carbon markets, carbon finance, and linking it to the international system. So that's kind of the Coles notes of that prospectively long conversation. It was a article in, I think it was May of 2017, that I kind of read on a lazy Sunday kind of thing. And it was like probably a half-hour read, and it was talking about Ethereum and tokenization and ICOs. And it was kind of at the end of that where I'm like, oh my gosh, here's this amazing tool. Immediately it makes sense that it fits with the work that we do, and then that fascination and the awesomeness of the Ethereum community and crypto writ large was really what started to cement those things and walk me down the path towards figuring out, in my opinion, that the killer use case for blockchain vis-a-vis climate change was to put the Paris Agreement on the blockchain, or more specifically, Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement on the blockchain, to connect the national carbon accounts of all of the countries of the world to enable cross-border collaboration on emission reductions. And mumble, and here we are.
And can you give just a little bit of like kind of informal background on where we're at with the Paris Agreement and what that signifies for kind of the future of the world, I guess?
Sure. So the Paris Agreement was negotiated in December 2015 in Paris. And what's really important, and it's the product, so it was the 21st annual UN Climate Change Conference from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change process. And it's where all the world finally got together and said, okay, all of the countries in the world are going to work on addressing climate change together. And here is a minimum viable product of rules around how we're going to do that. I think the most fascinating component of the Paris Agreement for decentralization kind of folks and blockchain folks is that the outcome or the requirements of how countries need to act under the Paris Agreement is actually very decentralized, or more, or put another way, it's kind of self-sovereign. So all of the countries have agreed to play ball, but they all get to play the super sports ball game that they want to. They all get to decide what they want to commit towards reducing emissions, how they're even going to denominate that, and how much they're going to do. And there's not really a lot of direct recourse under the Paris Agreement to tell them otherwise. Sometimes people get frustrated that this UN climate process doesn't have more teeth or more explicit ability to require countries to act in a certain way. Sometimes I lob it back and I'm like, would you rather that the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat based in Bonn, Germany has like nuclear missiles that they can launch at countries if they're behaving badly? I realize that there's a little bit of daylight between the two, but in any case, countries have a lot of leeway. And for one more historical plank on that, the Copenhagen Accord, which was hoped to be achieved in 2009 at COP15, so 6 years before, that was a very prescriptive top-down structure of an accord that the world tried and failed to come to agreement around. And that was going to be like, you're a more developed country, you have this path towards working on climate change, you're a lesser developed country, you've got this path. And that's kind of it. And people weren't willing to sign on, and so they didn't. And so I think that the UNFCCC process kind of learned a bit of a lesson there, which yielded to Paris Agreement, which is that there is quite a decentralization or a sovereignty in what countries want to do. So that's what was necessary to get people on board. And that arcs out into the nuts and bolts of the carbon market and carbon trading system under Article 6.2. But it leads to one of the core components of what we're trying to do at the Blockchain for Climate Foundation, and with the tool that we're building, the Bitmo platform, which is all of the countries, the countries are basically hold the chips in this case, and they get to make decisions. And so they will make decisions as they see fit, in this case around the quality of the carbon credits that they're inputting to the system. What we're trying to do to adapt to that reality is, if you're a country, we call it the national party, so there's sort of an office usually within the Ministry of Environment that is the competent party for negotiations with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. They're the national party, so we'll talk about them, but they hold all the chips in terms of the country's compliance. And so national party, you can insert whatever credits you want to into the system because that complies more or less with the rules of the Paris Agreement. However, we are going to create a system that is both transparent and clear enough to be able to show the quality characteristics and the decisions and the makeup of these carbon credits that you're inputting into the system, so that other countries can make decisions and have their own scrutiny onto quality. And in so doing, we hope to be able to carrot people rather than stick. We hope to be able to pull the space and the actors in the space to the light, and to be putting out the highest quality projects and creating the highest quality tons, the highest quality credits, because it's super transparent for the market to see which ones are good, which ones are bad, and the good market actors and the people, the countries and people who are wanting to have real climate benefit will buy the high quality and not the low, and kind of help manage for the ambiguity of that part of the Paris Agreement, which was necessary to get people on board. So hopefully that's a helpful arc. The interesting part about the Paris Agreement is the agreement was in 2015, but then they have rule books for each of the different articles of the Paris Agreement. And the only one that still hasn't been successfully negotiated after lots of work is Article 6, which is the one part on carbon trading. And this year's COP has been canceled because of COVID. So it'll be next year in Glasgow instead of this year in Glasgow. And so there's hope that those negotiations will be complete and sort of make that article ready to go. I think it is pertinent that a lot of the work of Blockchain for Climate Foundation has been with an eye to supporting the UNFCCC process, supporting these countries, and trying to keep stuff moving along. With these roadblocks of, not being able to negotiate the final deal, we want to create a tool that both helps countries envision where they might be able to go to in the future and using this system to hopefully have more comfort and trust in what's getting negotiated, because they can see how the design characteristics of what we're building will help yield a tighter and better running Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And finally, we're trying to build nuts and bolts infrastructure for use by the UNFCCC and by these national parties, so that, because otherwise they're waiting until the final negotiation of these rules to even put pen to paper on some of the architecture, which in the previous iteration under the Kyoto Protocol and the Kyoto Clean Development Mechanism, they feel it would take about 3 years to rebuild that system for the Paris Agreement, and they won't start that until Article 6 is negotiated. So that's 3 or 4 years out or more, theoretically, before we could start to see compliant trading of these carbon credits under the system. And so the climate can't wait. We can't wait. And so we are working really hard to build some tools here so that people can get moving ASAP.
Awesome. That's a really elegant navigation of some very complex topics. And I just want to kind of point out that as one of the bigger cynics from the cypherpunk space, like the reason a lot of us are cynical in the application of blockchain is it's a multidisciplinary technology that is only required in very complex situations. And this is one of them. That whole, the up in the airness of like that self-sovereignty and self-determination needs to be built in order for countries to participate. That creates this really exciting space where you're playing with the core elements of crypto economics here. You're trying to incentivize people to not just do something because they're being told, but to transcend that and to be aspirational and have the best carbon credits, so that, and that's honestly steering by even traditional capitalist values. Like this whole thing in crypto economics is even bad actors within a crypto economic system will do good acts. So I think you've really kind of highlighted how the Paris Agreement leaves that scenario open. And I'm curious if you can let us know a bit about where Blockchain for Climate Foundation is at with building the Bitmo prototype and with your other activities, just like kind of current state of affairs for the foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. From our sort of beginnings in 2017, and from recognizing that creating this ability for inter-country trades, in between country trades as part of the Paris Agreement, as where the most valuable use case for this was, even amidst a broader climate space, and sort of pulling together a ragtag band of rebels in our underground base at D-Control under the lighted sidewalk on Pender Street, where Chelsea made such a great home for so many people. We've evolved kind of, I guess it's 3 years from there. Cam coincidentally has, I think, the most canonical knowledge of all of the things that have transpired in between here and there. But leaping forward to now, we're in a really exciting moment for Blockchain for Climate Foundation, for sure. And that's built on a couple things. I think the binary yes, no, the most exciting binary yes, no reality question is kind of answered by our colleague Mahmoud Botch down in the dark at the bottom of the screen there, who is a coder from SFU, who's joined us for this co-op semester to help us bring all these wild ideas into fruition, into code. And so until now, well, we can talk more about that. There's been a lot of neat things, but there has not been code getting put down, and Mahmoud has changed that, for which we're forever grateful. And it's thoroughly exciting to start seeing the work that everybody's been putting in around this to start to take form in different colored letters and numbers on GitHub and on the screen that Mahmoud shares. So that's super duper exciting. Part of that reality, there's a couple pieces, but I think one of note is that the dreams that we had, or the vision that we had for a completed tool, have gone from, there's pieces of the puzzle of very like simple, straightforward stuff, and then stuff that we're like dreaming of in the future that we're going to have to build. And a bunch of that future stuff is actually already landing, and people have made it a reality. That's been a big change as well. I'd say even from this summer, is our kind of looping back around and realizing that a lot of the tools that we thought we'd have to create from scratch are actually getting made. And that I will take a small amount of credit for belief in the Ethereum community, that the innovation and like zaniness and creativity and commitment of people in that community have put together so many of the components of what we need to have a Bitmo platform operating like we dream it to be. They have created those tools and either provide an aspect of plug and play where we can fork stuff, or where we can see what other people are doing, envision it, and build that, or where there's things that are not a part of the Bitmo platform, but where we have Uniswap. So I guess not Uniswap. In this case, oh my God, where is my brain? OpenSea, where Uniswap, but for NFTs, right? Where you can now execute a market for NFTs, and you can just make those trades. So we can either, you can work on forking or recreating that, but even as a backstop, or even as something from a MVP or a pre-MVP, or to help us imagine an MVP, we can transfer, we can make trades and transfers and sales of NFTs, and stuff like Rarible, where you can envision going out and minting a bunch of NFTs, and see that already happening. So that's a bit of a lurchy point there. I think a key thing to note in this is that a lot of the inspiration for how do we actually create a platform that does what Article 6 of the Paris Agreement needs it to do, a lot of that vision clarified one evening at Decontrol, when Chelsea and folks wrangled the builders of CryptoKitties down like in the middle of their launch, like day 2 or something of their public launch, to come and give us a couple-hour presentation on this new fantastic ERC 721 tool that they've done. And that definitely is, a massive milestone in our organization and in the ability to envision this, because carbon offsets, or carbon credits, or ITMOs as they call them under the Paris Agreement, internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. That's the Paris Agreement name for a carbon credit under that system. And so BitMo, of course, is blockchain internationally transferred mitigation outcome. And it sounds cute like bit something as well, which actually was not planned. In any case, ITMOs, the thing that gives these intangible digital assets or environmental assets value is being able to really strongly confirm the underlying real world, real atmosphere benefit that was created by undertaking a project, and that you have 1 ton of that project. And so before our work, there were really great precedents and forebearers, like the folks from DAO IPCI, who were the first to put carbon credits on the blockchain back in March of 2017, I believe. And so what they did is they did an ERC 20 issuance of credits, where they said, okay, we've got, say, I forget the numbers, but say we've got 10,000 of these carbon credits. They've been proven through the carbon offset generation process that they're real, and that we own them. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to mint 10,000 of those as ERC20 tokens, and then we can sell those. And so that was really cool because you now had a carbon credit on the blockchain. But the part where it fell short for us, or where we needed to envision something beyond that, especially for the Paris Agreement, is you could issue those 10,000 tons from that one project as, an ERC20 token of, project X. But if you wanted to bring in project Y, and it was a different project, maybe one was a forest carbon project and the other were windmills, or maybe it was, different underlying values of that project. If you issued them all under the, project X ERC20, you wouldn't be able to tell from the ERC20 if you had a credit from one project or the other. And that just dilutes, you can't, it's a non-starter, you can't play ball that way. And so with the Paris Agreement, and we're hoping to see tens of thousands of projects fundamentally someday, if we're to have a hope and heck against beating climate change, you need to have a current, a token where you can have projects from all the different types of projects on that token. And the values will vary based on what kind of credit it is, but we want it to all be one token, so it's all in one bundle rather than having 10,000 different token types. And so what we needed to be able to do is, stamp right on the outside of the token, for a very non-blockchainy example, or non-code based example, what are the fundamentals of this credit? So yes, it's a Bitmo token like all the others, but what's its project name? What's its vintage? What country was it created in, and what's a serial number, what's a unique identifier, and then what system is it coming from? So there is no ITMO or BITMO offset or carbon credit standard. It has to be created to another standard and then imported, and then you have its genesis data inked into the NFT, the token, the BITMO. So you always see that and know that's there. And then you'll also have a link to a bunch more off-chain data for the voluminous information around the standardization and certification, hundreds of pages around that. And so CryptoKitties and having 8 different bits of data around eye color, background color, fur type, that was the big aha, where it's like, okay, we can use this tool to have one, it's not a currency, but one token type, but a bunch of different projects, and even bloom into more than I think we were thinking, an ability to have the tokens be unique indicators of value, which is necessary for people to feel comfortable that they represent the underlying asset, and that we can set up a system where people can deal with them in a way that brings that transparency and that ability to hold countries to account, and to have a marketplace, have market dynamics that favor the best actors.
That's key. And one thing I really like about the way this system's being designed as well is just as an individual, one of the things that got me into like decentralization and things like that is, as an individual, when it comes to issues like climate change, I have felt incredibly disempowered to participate in any way, but this opens a new way that like the eyes of the people just auditing things and conversing about the data being shared and stuff. That is an important element of this system as well. Like even if you don't touch a single Bitmo and none enter your wallets, you can still play a valuable role in this because it creates community and it creates conversation around it. And I especially like that you're really kind of encoding the specifics of these projects, because I know that even the material and earth sciences are still to some degree theoretical, and the difference between like one effort to reduce carbon emissions and another maybe, like some people may think this is a better road, some people may think this is. So this really gives some choice there, which is a huge thing for decentralists, I think.
Yeah, that's a really neat point. That's really cool. And I think it reminds me of something, which is we're trying to right size what we bite off here, and create, both bite it off that it's something that we can achieve if we're really fortunate and everything lands really great, but also that it doesn't overreach or underreach, and though the depth of a lot of my other work and other folks like Jeffrey on this call really are around creating and quantifying and asserting and understanding the carbon value of the underlying projects. That's really dear and deep to our heart. But I think we also recognize that what we've just spent a bunch of time explaining is creating the best vessel to land that stuff on, but that there's all sorts of other processes, that are in place now and that need to continue to get improved and established to be able to create real emission reductions outcomes and quantify them and certify them and pack them. And I think the exciting thing is we can do this really well, and have it be kind of a hub for people, for countries, and fundamentally people beyond that in the future to use. Then that leaves room for these other things to be developed well. There's also the sort of question of when do you take information from off the blockchain to on the blockchain? I've been working on popularizing a term for that theoretical moment with a wonderful human I met, Emma Weisbord, a couple of years ago, because we were trying to describe something which we really could have just said off-chain to on-chain, but we spent so much time trying to figure out what to call it that we're like, we could just call it our last names. And so I actually would love to get Cam's help on, what do we need, or yours, Chelsea, actually maybe even especially yours in terms of archival sciences, what do we need to do to make it legit that we can call it after our last names, so that if all this stuff all falls apart, in the future, there may still be one little bit of our work.
Totally.
But that off-chain to on-chain question is such a big piece of I think all of the blockchain for social good space, and for impact space, and where where there's exogenous, there's off-chain realities that we need to get on chain, and I think a lot of 2017 was around figuring out where that point is, and so in this case, a fit for the Paris Agreement is really national parties or countries, as we said, they hold the chips. They get to decide what credits count under Article 6.4. There's Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. There's another one, Article 6.4, where there's an executive board that's set up to be the arbiter of what counts as an Article 6.4 credit. So that'll be actively managed. It should be well managed. But Article 6.2 is also quirky because countries just get to say, oh yeah, this is an emission reduction outcome that we achieved in country and that we're willing to let move out of our carbon account onto somebody else's. And so that's that's part of that reality is, and I think it goes with that decentralization. We're creating, where this goes with on-chain, off-chain, there's a lot of discussion around, should we be moving the blockchain aspect of this further down into the creation of that underlying credit? That, could be something that, some government just says, well, this counts. Other governments will say, well, there have been voluntary carbon credits or subnational or even national carbon credit standard units, tons being created, and we're going to tokenize this up onto the Bitmo platform. And so they import that, have that Genesis data. There are other people starting to work on how to have the blockchain work, be engaged with that monitoring, reporting, and verification, be engaged with that earlier and fundamental creation of that credit. I think a lot of us are also fascinated with this, and it takes a little bit of, discipline sometimes to be like, no, we're going to just focus on this piece right now, knock this out of the park, so that all of the other people working on those aspects, be it blockchain related or not, will have a spot where we can make that transfer between countries in a way that, should we do this correctly, is Paris Agreement compliant.
Excellent. And I mean, you're touching an area here that's really crucial for a lot of the dream uses of blockchain for social good that aren't even close to feasible yet, in my opinion. Like a lot of the stuff we want to do with supply chain verification and stuff, Currently, the reality of the matter is, if you're trying to prevent like false pharmaceuticals from being sold or whatever, or being swapped out, look, I moved your QR code from that bottle to that bottle. Now, how will your blockchain stop me? So it's like the conceptualization around making things real and verifying them onto these ledgers from inception, and even determining what that means, is such an important space for us to work through in order to get to those future use cases too.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why carbon credits are such a great fit. You know, they're a good, simple first go at this. Not that simple, but simpler than physical things, because so much of the work and expense and effort around making a carbon credit, undertaking a carbon offset project, all of that work to transmogrify a real action in the environment into an intangible environmental asset, that's like what I do all day when I'm not doing blockchain stuff. There is a whole process and 20 years of experience plus doing specifically that task. How do we prove that that outcome is achieved on the landscape? It has this value and that you own that value. And so much of the work of a carbon credit project, or a person like myself working on developing one, goes into cracking that tough nut, that Ethereum is trying to do, that other folks are trying to do, around how do you ensure that you're reflecting reality, physical reality, onto the blockchain. So in a sense, we had a jump start on that in the carbon market space, because that's what all of our work is really based on to begin with.
Yeah. For one of my classes at UBC, I just reread Audre Lorde's excellent essay on how you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. And I think this is what we face a lot in disruptive technology, is like, how do we ensure we're not creating a more perfect and total way for those in power to exploit systems? Like, if we didn't have a verifiable public blockchain ledger system for this, it would just be another way for people to pass money to one another, people who already have money, to be like, yep, okay, this is an excellent exchange mechanism. So I'm curious about, like, what was it in Ethereum and its community that you saw, because I know from the beginning you were really inspired and saw like minds there. What can you tell me, us, a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So even at a simple level, and I'll just, refine it to 2017, 2018 for a moment for giggles. Um, Other than the brilliant and good-looking Dogecoin community, the Ethereum community had a lot of, the vibrancy, zaniness, creativity, and hustle that you would want to see in a community doing this. Um, it's funny because like it felt so obvious that I didn't really question it, and I actually haven't spent too much time even trying to elucidate why from that community point of view, other than very welcoming, so much fun, super strong crypto Twitter game, and I think you could believe in them that they were going to be spinning out tools for everybody to use in this ecosystem, both things that you were hoping for them to create, or that you could imagine, or that people were talking about, as well as stuff that you could have never imagined in your wildest dreams. And I think maybe that's where a lot of the magic comes. That's a big part of life, right? Like, I think the zone is where you could have never imagined something would be as good as it is, and you're just super stoked and grateful because that's all you can do. And I think that the Ethereum community is really like that. So as we keep seeing stuff, some of it feels evolutionary, like you can see the tracking, and other stuff is just like revolutionary, or a punctuated equilibrium where like you could have never imagined. That is just super cool, and that's very compelling for anybody, and especially if a lot of your one's work is hallmarked by kind of doing stuff for the first time, or kind of early in a cycle. So that really resonated for me. There's been lots of offset work before the work that I was doing in 2004, but most of the work in that space has happened since, and definitely have an affinity for, new, interesting, fascinating things that I can see changing the world for the better. And so also really saw that in the Ethereum community. From a really practical sense, part of it was that, I know that even that, no man or no team is an island, and that we were going to need, no matter how, big and effective we got, we would fundamentally need there to be other people and other teams in the ecosystem creating tools for us to use, either ones we knew that we wanted to or things that moved the bar forward. And so Ethereum was also easy to trust with that, that there was going to be that network effect of, of people getting on board. So I'd say that's why I was stoked. I also think that the discussions around going from proof of work to proof of stake and sharding, and the fact that even as, in 2017 with CryptoKitties, we really saw that bandwidth or, throughput block formation was a barrier to price and feasibility of doing things on the network. The fact that there have been plans to fix that also allowed us to continue to work on that, believing that wherever it hammers out, we're going to be able to do it, whether it's on a side chain, whether everything's going to get up to proof of stake and there won't be bottlenecks. And then also led to the interesting reality right now where, as the state of NFTs and the ability to mint and transfer NFTs en masse continues to evolve, ERC 1155, ERC 2309, we may not even actually have to rely on, a sharding or a state channel or a side chain or anything like that. We may actually just be able to do it on main chain after all. So that's been extremely exciting. One other thing that I did want to note in what allowed us to see the possibility and kind of give a lifeline after the huge inspiration of ERC 721 was the work that Matt Lockyer did on putting out ERC 998 around crypto composables, and that would solve the issue of being able to mint lots of tokens at one time and be able to move them all in a clump by having sort of parent and child tokens, loading up a parent token with a bunch of the tons from your project and moving that as one clump there. And so that has been a big inspiration and helped us see beyond the limitations of ERC 721. And it's sort of skipped along the surface of the water to inspire, I'd say, new NFT standards, which is where we're building on right now.
Yeah, the crypto composables concept definitely opened up an aha for anyone. I'm sure a couple people had thought of like use cases that involved non-fungible tokens owning other non-fungible tokens, like in passing, but Matt actually created that. And then it brought to a lot of us the understanding of, oh, what would this be like? It almost comes full circle to the joking reason given for Vitalik creating Ethereum, which was somebody nerfed his warlock in World of Warcraft. He had like it was like a piece of special equipment or something that he really cared about. And because it's not a, self-sovereign platform, he just logged in one day as a young teenage boy and his item was gone and he was inconsolable and cried the night away. And then someday Ethereum was born from that. So it's really this idea of like, what if his warlock could have had little mini warlocks and stuff like that? Like once you start thinking in that extensible way, it does get really exciting.
Yeah.
I wanted to, before asking my final question, before we open up to any questions from attendees, I wanted to give a little bit more context to the CryptoKitties event so long ago, because it really warms my heart that had an aha moment. And actually, so that was actually a launch party for Rob Meyer's Bad Sheeb or Bad Shibe comic that he made. I was like, okay, I was setting that up. And then I was like, why don't we do art and music on the blockchain? Because I just got introduced to Jonathan Mann, who was like looking at tokenization of his song a day thing. He's been making one song a day for more than 10 years now. And so I just happened to reach out to Mac at the beginning of when they were rolling out CryptoKitties. And when I confirmed him for that day, it had not gone insane at all. So we had this, they ended up being like the secret stars of the day, because it was, like you said, about 3 days into launch or something, and it was starting to hit like the crypto news of like, weird cat trading program slows down Ethereum and stuff like that. And people were selling like really expensive original crypto kitties and stuff. So that was a really magical time, in terms of just all falling together. And again, this early in a space, I think we stack up a lot of stories like that. Like, it didn't feel like a really special magical thing. It was fun, but it didn't feel like it would be like something we'd be looking back on like this for years that would actually influence paths. So
Huh.
yay to Rob Myers and Jonathan Mann as well. They were,
It didn't feel like that even at the end of the evening.
I guess so. I think maybe I was nervous because I rapped at the end. So I just, whenever I rap publicly, I have to just like go get some air because I'm nervous after that. Also, I don't know if you know, when Alex and I were dating then, he did not know I was a crypto rapper, and that is the only genre of music he listens to. So he was particularly blown away when I just got up and started rapping about Bitcoin. He's like, "What? I did what?" So pretty weird overall, but it was a very special night. What I loved about it was we had Decontrol pretty packed, but it was still very intimate because it's a little, living room sort of thing underground. So I'm really glad that all of this, so much thinking came out of that, because I do think non-fungible tokens give some really interesting design opportunities, and some of those haven't even been taken advantage of yet for like real world use cases. So my final big picture question, which I gave you warning on, is if all continues to go swimmingly in Ethereum, if our transition to 2 is great and stuff like that, what would you see the potential for like Ethereum's role in global social good in 15 to 20 years? And you can, if you just want to kind of start with like what it looks like for Blockchain for Climate Foundation and Bitmos and stuff, that's awesome too.
Yeah. So that is a delightful open-ended question, and it's like a nice opportunity for mischief or even meme dropping within it. There's a conversation that Cam and I have and other members of the team around how visible should blockchain be in your solution? Should we just, have it all be, running on the rails of blockchain, but never talk about it? Or not. And I think one of the things that we've come up with in those discussions is that if we don't talk about the blockchain aspect of it and what it brings to the table, then we're always going to be fighting a rearguard action against the people who are like, oh, who is this? What is this cryptocurrency? Who are these decentralized weirdos? Is this just Bitcoin? Are we going to burn the planet down by trying to save it with carbon credits? So I will maybe controversially say that in 20 years' time, people will still be talking about Ethereum and about how we're going to get to 2.0. Oh, no, wait, just kidding. I didn't mean, that was just for laughs. But were it to take that long, but solutions to keep coming out to enable people to do stuff on the 1.x main chain, maybe that's okay too. But I'm not deep enough to know. But I think it would be great if people are still talking about, this magical world computer that allows us to do this really cool stuff in a self-sovereign way. It has a portability and a sovereignness that continues just to work really well for humans. May the world get easier and more secure and safe and comfortable and prosperous for people, or may it be totally in the crapper and a lot more difficult and a lot more people facing more hardships than they do right now. Either way, those aspects of that portability and sovereignty, I think, are valuable. I think that finding a way to have people's contributions to the space continue to be recognized, both in a community setting as well as in a resources and monetary setting. If people can keep being incentivized to do stuff and sort of fairly compensated, or within the bounds of human fairness on that, I think that can also be really beneficial. The transparency of stuff on the main chain and the spirit of people bringing stuff to the table and making incremental improvements um, and innovation in the space. I'd like to think that Ethereum can still be a really good home for that. And, you know, I think that it can maintain and even evolve to an even less oligarchic reality. So there's always going to be whales in a lot of these spaces, and they deserve a lot of cred for early investment, early mining, early engagement. But I also hope that there can be, you know, that is interfiled with, and I guess that those, you know, folks that hold those chips can also see the value in other people, you know, building and accruing value that are being created by people in the space. So I think broad strokes, I see that. And I think in the earlier term, there will be a lot of neat people, probably a lot of it using NFTs, quite honestly, you know, around provable social and environmental good outcomes. Like there's so many other things to do in climate, so many other things to do, you know, let alone getting into other spaces, be it community benefit or health benefit or biodiversity benefit, where there is a role for quantifiability, for, you know, tradability, often called fungibility, whether it's, you know, the fungibility of having all of, you know, I would say, you know, is a Bitmo token fungible if it's, you know, tens of thousands of different projects on non-fungible tokens being created into a market that can all be traded as one token. So I think that there's a lot of game to go there. I think that our team is in a really neat position to bring something to the space that, you know, it is innovating every day, and exciting to land something that works and have it also inspire other people in the blockchain space. And I think that, you know, the work that all the members of the team are doing in other aspects of their work will continue to really have a snowballing effect of positive things being created into, you know, the Ethereum ecosystem and the broader social and environmental community ecosystem around the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, one of the things that keeps me involved in Ethereum actively and keeps me really kind of looped into that space is the amazing, in my perspective, attitudes and understanding of labor and justice and things like that, like the movement towards starting to bounty things and stuff like that. Like we have a world that's forcing our generation and beyond essentially into gig workers, and we don't have compensation structures and economic structures reflecting that. So I think things like the experiments going on at Gitcoin and things like that, of like people being able to contribute to causes they care about or get paid for currently mostly technical work they're doing, but those are really exciting. And it's something that shows me Ethereum as a community continually self-selecting for and encouraging and inviting creative people who want a better state for the world at large. So I definitely support that understanding. I would like to open it up to anyone who is in attendance who might have a question. And if you have a question, but you don't want to be recorded, you can put it into the chat and I will read it aloud. Now, this is the point in virtual events that sometimes becomes like either people are typing or no one has a question. So we can just continue kind of discussing and wrapping up. And if any questions come in, we will address them. But I really have been super excited to see how this has shaped up, Joseph, and to see the team grow over time. And it seems like you're always bringing in a ton of people with unique perspectives. And I think that's what the blockchain industry needs the most. What excites me the most beyond your actual mission about Blockchain for Climate Foundation is that you're onboarding like really passionate, intelligent people from other sectors a lot of the time to learn about blockchain. And as a Bitcoiner, I'm worried about the Bitcoin like greedy hodlers narrative being one of the primary ones. So someone asks if there are any specific areas where you currently need help, or how would you recommend interested humans get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for that. One of the things, along with the stuff mentioned so far, that I'm really excited about, back one half step is we're really excited to have Nadine and Genevieve on the call. Also very fresh additions to the team. Genevieve is or Jen is our new digital community manager. Was today the first day, just quite recently. And so one of the things that precipitates out of having a bunch of amazing people who are all rock stars in their own domain, feeling the vibe and wanting to engage with Blockchain for Climate Foundation, is there's a responsibility that falls on us to make sure we're actually engaging our internal community well, external and internal, and in particularly internal, because there's wonderful people, and I have been spotty in the ability sometimes to engage with people a lot, and other times that falls back when stuff's busy or whatever. So we're really excited to have Genevieve bringing some strength and inspiration around how to engage the community in a way that really serves the members of the team and advisors, and is interesting and exciting for them, and that can also help clarify and grease the wheels for people to be contributing their skill sets and their interest towards the space. One of the ways that will actually manifest is around James's question is message Genevieve, and we're going to try to figure, keep refining that. We have had a thing where people can send something in on the website and raise their hands to help, and that Chelsea has just posted. And I have a spotty record of being able to engage with folks on that, sometimes yes and sometimes no, which is not necessarily a reflection of the people. It's where it is in the workflow and stuff. So we hope to be able to go back through that as well. I did also just want to mention Nadine joining us as part of UBC Sustainability Scholars, and we're really excited about her mandate to come and help us think through the National Party Working Group and how do we engage with these national parties, with these countries, to have them help us vision what needs to get built, both in a general sense as well as in their often highly technical understanding of the Paris Agreement sense. And so our plan is to be convening those communities, have maybe a half dozen that we walk along to also become champions and eventual users of our system, because we don't need everybody to uptake it. We need two countries to uptake it, one to be a buyer and one be a seller, and then we can go from there. I'm so really grateful to have you on as well. I think in terms of hard skills or specific things that we need to task, that we need help with, I actually don't. We've been blessed by the bounty of adding new members to the team and filling some of the really critical stuff that we needed to do, and so that's super exciting. And so I actually don't know what we need right now, but maybe somebody else on the team has a way to answer that. And then I think the other thing is I would bounce it back to the questioner. What do you see from listening to this presentation that speaks to you as something that you're really interested in, and would be interested in helping with and engaging on? Because that's always probably going to lead to the best outcomes, because the awesome people, I'm sure including you, who are attracted to this, are usually bringing a great set of skills in some specific space that would be of help.
Yeah, and this definitely, before Cam gives further info, I want to say too, we're just all in a universally interesting position with COVID of like you said, like we've had conferences delayed and stuff. So that's actually a really good time for us to be discussing, to be sharing, and really dreaming together. But Cam, do you have more concrete things to add?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say kind of general recommendations. I think a nice thing to realize about Blockchain for Climate Foundation is that as an organization, we do kind of embrace an open source model, not just specifically for our development of the tech. It's the entire organization in general. So the same way that you would contribute to open source technology, you can contribute to the organization based on kind of your own skill set. And I think the best way to go about that is, the link that Chelsea did pop up there. It will, if you input something there, let us kind of know what your skill set is, or what you're actually genuinely interested in, what you're interested in learning or working on, it will get to me, Joseph, Genevieve, Nadine, Chelsea, Jeffrey, who was also on the call, everyone else on the team, and we can start to kind of open up that discussion. So like, we're a very friendly and welcoming organization. So absolutely just kind of reach out and we can start to get the conversation rolling.
Thank you, Cam. I'm going to touch on, we had a question from someone fairly new to blockchain and Ethereum asking if there's a group in Vancouver for discussing more about using Ethereum for social good. And I can kind of speak to that insofar as there is not, in my knowledge, a dedicated one. Most of the meetup group for Ethereum that I cross-posted this on meetup.com has often been very focused on social good. And it's something that Kunal and I discussed, like being of real interest to us at UBC Blockchain Club. One thing I found is, unless it is like a full-on bull market with prices going crazy in cryptocurrency, any attempt to create smaller subgroups can kind of be difficult. So what I can recommend is that now that you've expressed this interest, which we also share, we can continue to try to offer events that are focused on this, and maybe set up, maybe a next thing to do is like a discussion group where people just chat about possible avenues for Ethereum for social good. And then we have another question for Blockchain for Climate. How are you doing customer discovery? Have you interviewed potential clients? Also wondering if you're looking into Canadian sovereignty issues like RV Marshall.
So I can take a swing at that. Part of the like preamble or the qualification of making sure we right size this work. And in building this tool, one of the things that I don't think we said explicitly is really at the start, or it all kind of flows from, in Paris Agreement Article 6.2, it all flows from the national parties. And so, for example, so national parties, i.e. countries, like there's officials at each country's, usually Ministry of Environment, that manages their negotiations with the UN and around the Paris Agreement. And so initially, well, actually, always, as far as we're concerned right now, in terms of Article 6.2, BITMOs or ITMOs that'll become BITMOs, the only user, I forget what we're calling it, but the only people who can issue are countries. And so that's reflecting the reality of the Paris Agreement that we're replicating onto our system. So initially, well, actually always, the issuers of BITMOs will be national parties that hold a wallet. And so Mahmoud has been building out the role-based access for how Canada, whoever's at the national, the national party, if they want to do this, then they will get a wallet, and that wallet is enabled to issue BITMOs, to use the BITMO platform to create a token or a million or trillion tokens or whatever. And so they have that right to do that, and that's always imprinted that Canada issued that token right onto the token. That's important because once they do that, it's fundamentally being taken. If it's one token or 1 ton, we're taking 1 ton of progress that Canada's made towards its emission reduction goals away from them. And so this is where, and it also starts to give some ahas to like, this is pretty serious stuff, because they're not minting this out of nowhere. There has to be an emission reduction that was achieved that they have to prove in order to create that unit, but they're also, by minting it into the system, saying, Canada right now emits 730 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And so if they were to sell one BITMO, to issue one BITMO rather, and send it out of their wallet, that would mean that we actually had 730,000,001 tons of emissions. Now, they would have actually had to do that out of reductions that have been achieved somewhere else in the marketplace. But you realize both that there's real skin in the game for countries here, and it also starts to get you into like, the next webinar's vision of what kind of crazy shenanigans could countries do engaged in the BITMO platform. And we probably should have some sort of war games type of thing, a hacker-led war games, one on the system, but also even one on the underlying idea of ITMOs and Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement and how all that can shake out. Anyway, that's a long-winded point to say about clients, that initially the clients are the national parties, because they're the ones we have to convince to use this system to issue their ITMOs, and also to basically greenlight their country for the ability to use ITMOs or BITMOs that were traded on the system. There's probably going to be some more rules that come down around that in the Paris Agreement, and it is always possible that, you know, something would break the code, quote unquote, where something that happened within the Paris Agreement's negotiations didn't allow us to roll this out the way that we've been envisioning. But we're working on creating that so that it doesn't happen, and staying engaged to be able to navigate that. After national parties, it would really be other market actors who potentially want to buy these for their own use as emitters, or other countries buying, that would start to become other customers. A little bit down the road, though, we're creating the tools for that as well. So that's a little bit around customer discovery in a sense. I'm gonna have to stop, but it also solves partly the sovereignty, because Canada has the sovereignty in this case.
Joseph, I can help you save your voice, because you're gonna cough your lung out right there. But kind of to tie back to kind of the explicit question on like the how process of customer discovery, and whether or not we're doing interviewing for interviewing potential clients. So I think a key thing to recognize is that a large chunk of the Blockchain for Climate team comes from the climate space. And myself, I've been working in and out of carbon and the climate space for over a decade. Joseph as well for a decade and a half, like on the ground, lots of on the ground, real experience with ultimately the end users, the target end users of this. So the approach for customer discovery is not as systematized as you might see in other settings where we're going about building MVPs and solutions, where picking up the phone and calling, interviewing, that does happen. And we've worked with various UX, UI, and design schools, and actually have gone through that sort of a process. But the key approach that we've been going through is we are attending all the various events where all these national parties are actually present. We go to the United Nations climate conferences. We go to all of these international events where these actual negotiations are happening, and we engage with them in a face-to-face setting when that was possible. Luckily, we were able to do that at COP25 before COVID hit. But we've done that in so many different settings throughout the entire year, various years, and showing them and the ideas that we have. At COP25, we had mock-ups of the basic idea, being able to pull out our phone and actually show them, this is the idea. What are your thoughts on this? Would you be willing to start to offer more feedback? And that's a process that's still ongoing. But we've been kind of embracing that approach because we already have deep ties in the climate space that we can leverage, and we don't need to kind of formalize the customer discovery in a way that you might do in other MVP or solution or startup settings. Hope that addresses the question slightly.
And I'll even chime in on there that the work that Nadine is getting going on with how to engage with national parties and build a national party working group where they're involved, they become champions and eventual users. But also the other major goal that we have with the National Party Working Group is to glean their expertise and skill sets around this. So I got to go to Singapore and engage with people up at their Energy Institute, as well as in the government. And I'm forgetting the Energy Institute right now, which is really bad, but they're amazing. And they send people to every single UN COP. They send people to the intersessionals, and they have volunteers in all of the different sessions taking notes, you know, because there's so many concurrent sessions on the stuff that's happening here. And so seeing how knowledgeable they were on the whole functioning of the UNFCCC process was a huge inspiration into why we want to focus on building this National Party Working Group and getting them engaged, bought in, and passionate and contributing, because you need those tentacles, and you need to opt in people to be keeping an eye on so many different aspects of this. And stuff still can, you know, change and break, but we get the best chance where we have lots of people learning and understanding and contributing to the state of play. And, we recognize that it's a super audacious goal, blockchain for climate, and the Bitmo platform, making something that people can use, making something that's fit for use within a, nation to nation trading of highly strategic carbon assets in a lot of ways, as climate change continues to grow as an issue, as there's a groundswell that hopefully will keep going around citizen concern, business concern, banks doing environmental and social good, governments making net zero promises. It's only going to get more intense and more high stakes as all of those, biophysical, natural, political, economic machines keep churning, balls keep rolling. And so, it's pretty wild what we're trying to do, and really appreciate everybody's, buy-in and engagement in trying to make this wild dream a reality, and all co-dreaming it. And I think it's good every once in a while to reflect that it is a really zany idea, and we're up against a lot of stuff, but we're really heartened by the community, by our team, by the support that we get from folks in terms of high fives, in terms of financial resources to do this, and in terms of people's time and willingness to engage on trying to solve all these problems and pieces of the puzzle. And I think we can do it.
And I think one thing to kind of bring up is we're in the fortunate position that we have close ties through various relationships and partnerships with organizations such as the United Nations Environment Program's partnership with the Danish Technical University, who really has a research cluster out there that focuses on the intersection between blockchain technologies and the Paris Agreement specifically, what is precisely what we're looking at. And they have so much expertise on both worlds, the world's blockchain as well as the Paris Agreement, who we're often getting so much insight through. As well as the International Emissions Trading Association. We have some close ties with them through various relationships through over the decades. And they every year, or at COP, the United Nations climate conferences, they host their own hub, which is basically like a home within the COP conferences. And we spent probably like 18 out of 24 hours a day at that hub with all the people that are the active players in the emissions trading world. So, and being able to kind of just live and breathe the air beside them and discuss in regular conversation the ideas from the people that are living the carbon world has been super beneficial in terms of our customer discovery and just figuring out whether or not our ideas are resonating with people. Are you completely allergic to this idea whatsoever? What do we need to change? What's working and what's the appetite for it?
Yeah, I wanted to pipe in as well that this initiative started as volunteer and remains primarily a volunteer initiative, which is so amazing, and for which we're deeply grateful. Streaming in around last year, a little bit earlier in the year than this, we actually got word that we got our first funding in the door through the RBC Foundation, Royal Bank of Canada Foundation, and their RBC Tech for Nature fund. So they're actually supporting a range of different blockchain initiatives. I know that they've got a blockchain and water thing that they're working on in the Maritimes. And so that's been pretty special also in terms of having this make sense to other people, and to, I think, people quite astute around a lot of aspects, including impact and technology and their goals around water and around climate and nature. And that's allowed us to kind of turbocharge what we're doing so that we have money to pay for help in positions or be partner and contributing funds to other funding opportunities, like through Eco Canada, that deploys Canadian federal government money that lets us bring on some of our team. So that's been a real game changer in terms of having some coins to rub together to do some of these specific aspects. And then I would really say that we wouldn't be where we are without the strategic partnership with EcoTrust Canada, which is a national charity based here in Vancouver, that is where I work. I have my full-time job as the Director of Climate Innovation, and where I'm able to spend about a third of my time on blockchain for climate. And so both letting me spend this time and have the resources through them to work on this, but then also really lately a really deepening role enabled by my colleague Danby McDonnell there, who's an EcoTrust Canada teammate, to create an onboarding and a landing zone for the folks that are joining our team on a more sort of official and specific basis. Many who, all of whom I think are on the call right now. And so it's been pretty special. And EcoTrust, as you know, we're 25 years old this year, and has a really amazing pedigree that's fascinating to read through. But having that host organization with just like, bomb-proof admin, and financial and charitable status that allows us to take foundation money like the RBC Foundation, and just being able to click in to that back office aspect of stuff, and encouragement and stoke around this has really been a game changer. And I think it's allowing us to go from a lot of these passion to whole new level, whole new punctuated equilibrium of being able to stack, teammates getting paid real money to do real stuff, focused, and get building, take the communications to the next level, continue to grow the inspiration and understanding, and honing in on what we need to do to make the strategy land. So these have been invaluable partners to help take something that, I think is still very grassroots and scrappy, and couldn't happen without the volunteer aspect by any stretch of the imagination, but then turbocharge that. And so I think that's also a neat thing for people to have in their heads as they're creating initiatives. I realize it's the alternative to try to doing something that you need to make an ICO, or that you need to take a capital investment, either benevolent or not. Those are the other ways that people get capitalized to have the team, have the hardware, the software, whatever, in order to do this work. And as I've just been at EcoTrust Canada less than 2 years, as a new participant in the nonprofit and charitable space, I'm awed by the ability of that to help these things that didn't necessarily get birthed within that space, help them really elegantly to the next level. So very grateful for that as well.
One tiny thing that might be worth adding is, I think, kind of the flip side of customer discovery. Something important is that if we want to think of like the developer discovery, I think one of the key things to recognize is we've been fortunate to work with people like Chelsea and Mahmood, who have been able to take our idea and go through a discovery process on the technical side of things to present it to the Ethereum community, the blockchain developers, to figure out, is this idea even technically a good idea? Because we can have a fantastic idea that might work in the climate space, but technically it could be a completely botched idea, play on words on Mahmood's name there. But we need to ensure that it's a technically feasible idea too. Specifically, it could be fantastic, but maybe the technology is not there, or maybe we're trying to think about this in a way that doesn't do blockchain technology kind of justice. And we've gone through a process of that, fortunately, through Chelsea. Very thankful for that. And it's been super, super beneficial to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cam.
I'll echo that. And having, Chelsea's Amor move into the into the masters and onwards in the information school, I continue to think is such an elegant, wise outgrowth and continuation of your game, your existing Genesis game. And it's been really exciting to be able to kind of have that 1-2 punch of understanding the crypto and blockchain space, and doing the organizational thinking, and even having the consulting mindset that you deployed so well over the course of the summer, of how to take really a lot of like Cam's and my's, the whole team's ideas, and through the mouthpieces of Cam and I, to try to be like, okay, well, what do we actually want to, what do we tell Mahmood to code how do we do that transmogrification or that translation from, knowing some climate stuff, learning a bunch of crypto stuff on crypto Twitter. An inordinate amount of the inspiration and learning for this, by the way, has been done on crypto Twitter. I don't know any way to communicate it other than that. But that all needs, a clearing of the signal and being put down on paper, to whiteboard, to paper, to mock-ups, to code. And Chelsea, you did invaluable work helping us handhold that information flow this summer. And so excited to be doing that with Mahmoud, with Botch. On our calls and in that development process. It's pretty special, and we're super fortunate to have Mahmoud's, to just happen to find an amazing blockchain developer on the SFU co-op posted.
It's very uncanny. Like, I've been hiring for ops people in this space for 3 years, and it's really, really good luck that y'all found each other. I also want to add that for the blockchains in Ethereum space, the work that you're doing, you mentioned like the sort of war games, trying out, breaking the prototype and stuff. That's exactly the sort of work that is needed in Ethereum, and far too often, I think we just learned like in the past year or two how necessary that is, because the DAO hack, for example, as I've brought up in conversation before, it's a very common and doable way to exploit someone's code since the 80s. Like, a re-entrancy attack is a pretty normal thing to model in computer science, but since we didn't used to store millions of dollars in software contracts, no one thought to think of it. No one thought, hey, this could be utilized on a smart contract. So I think we're in the space in blockchain where that war games process of prototype something and then try to break it both on the platform and conceptually is really valuable. So the learnings from that will be really great too. I guess we are a little bit over, but it's been an awesome conversation, so super worth it. And thank you all so much. And thank you, Joseph. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Great to see other folks from outside of the team, and thank you for your questions. And would be great to stay in touch around ideas that you guys might have for engagement around this. And yeah, thanks for the stoke. And Chelsea, thank you so much for organizing this, building such a cute tile to promote it. Yeah, everybody, just thanks from the bottom of my heart for your work on this, and really excited where we've got it going.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and I'm seeing we got a question on how to follow further. So before I stop the recording, I will say that you can follow Blockchain for Climate on blockchainforclimate.org. And also on your Twitter, correct? That should be linked from your site, I imagine.
Yeah, it's at Block for Climate.
Okay, at Block, the number 4 or the letter
No,
or the word 4. Okay,
that's
Block
2008.
Yeah. Can you tell I haven't been on social media in a while? I'm like, it's written in Lee, right?
That's a pet aesthetic. Well, I don't even know if 4 counts as lead speak. That would be a great argument to have. Or it's been so, it's only going to be ironic after it's gotten worn out by the normies.
Yeah, the next generation is going to love it. They're going to be all about lead speak.
20 years from now, it'll be blockchain for climate, but not.
But thank you so much. And yeah, for UBC Blockchain Club, we are on the mildly usable campus group site, but we also have a Facebook, and I will be cross-posting any of our virtual events to the Ethereum meetup group for Vancouver as well. So you can find us anywhere there. I'm hitting stop.